This video is going to walk you through, at a high level, the 4 major steps in building a Future Fit Scorecard. First, we need to build that overall corporate scorecard that captures the top-level performance of the business against the 21 Future Fit business goals. From there, we can drill down and ensure that the various Future Fit initiatives are correctly lined up to where the gaps are in the organization's current performance. From there, the next step is to build the operational scorecard. The operational scorecard is kind of the drill down that allows us to get a better perspective within each region, team, department, individuals, how they are performing against the Future Fit criteria. Now, in truth, you can go straight from the corporate scorecard down into the operational scorecard and skip the alignment step if your projects are already aligned. From the operational scorecard, we then drill down to the management practices. How do we use the Future Fit scorecard and the Future Fit operational scorecard to make better decisions day to day? Now, again, if we want to skip the operational scorecard, we can go straight from the initiative alignment into management practices. And in fact, if we wanted to, we could even go straight from the corporate scorecard down to management practices. So these 4 steps work best if you take them sequentially, but in fact you can skip steps depending on your organizational needs. So I'm now going to step you through each of these in a little bit more detail. So let's take a look at the corporate scorecard. What we're trying to do there is provide you with ongoing view of Future Fit's performance against the 21 Future Fit business goals. The initiative alignment determines the gap between your current performance and what your target Future Fit performance is. And that allows you to select the appropriate Future Fit gap closing initiatives and allocate your resources for maximum impact. The operational scorecard drills down to the department, team, and individual level and ensures that not only are we aligned with the overall goals, but we as an individual or as a team can understand our purpose and feel proud of the contribution we're making towards Future Fit. And the management practices are all about sustaining the Future Fit scorecard across time, making it part of the ongoing management process, not a separate step. Now, let's step through each of these in even more detail. So, the Future Fit corporate scorecard. What we're trying to do is, with any organization, refine which of the 21 goals fit for that organization. So, some are just not appropriate based on the business, the geography, and so forth. Now, the remaining ones then need to be prioritized because they're not all equally important for that organization for this period. So, for example, there may be stakeholder pressure or local regional issues that need to get dealt with critically in the near term. We then, based on those, identify indicators for each of those goals. Based on available data, how can we measure our current performance with indicators as opposed to measures? Now, the problem with indicators is sometimes they're not as strong as a detailed measure. So we should assess the signal strength to make sure all readers understand the relationship between that indicator and the underlying Future Fit goal. From there, we can begin setting what are our current targets for the current period. So ultimately, we want to push towards Future Fit, but every journey is taken one step at a time. What does this quarter or this year's step look like? We then, of course, need to harvest the current data and perhaps historic data so we can see the trend lines. And then finally, we can launch that corporate scorecard. And the corporate scorecard will look a bit like this, where within each of the categories, we can determine the key areas or the 21 goals that we need to measure and how we're performing, and maybe even see what the performance is over time. So this is the corporate level Future Fit scorecard. The next step is to understand about our initiative alignment. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is identify the core processes and activities, so processes and projects inside the organization, as well as those of our suppliers and our customers. And from there, we want to assess the impact and performance of each activity area against each future fit goal. Based on that, we'll identify some performance gaps between how we, our suppliers, and customers are conforming to those future fit goals. Then, we can take a look at the various initiatives we're proposing to try to close those gaps. And from there, we can realign our future fit gap closing initiatives to get maximum impact. Now, to show you what that looks like, it's a bit more confusing, but ultimately, we can chart for each of the future fit goals how well we're currently performing, which is the blue bar, and the gap between our current performance and what our strategy calls for, the gold part. And what we'll see is obviously in some areas there's no gap. In other cases there's a huge gap, and this allows us to figure out where the biggest opportunities are in our gap closing initiatives. This will cover both ourselves, our customers, and our suppliers, the whole bow tie. So if we take a look at any of the initiatives that we have underway, we can then determine their impact. So again, if we just take a look at the initiatives and chart them against the same 21 goals, these red dots represent the relative focus our current investment portfolio has. Now, the purpose of these, of course, are to close those performance gaps that we saw before, just the gold bars. We can ignore the blue for now. So if we overlay the charts, this is what we typically see, where in some cases we have a lot of projects lined up to close a gap. In other cases, we could be underinvesting. So what we're trying to do is help organizations align their investments in proportion to where their gaps are. Now, a quick heads up on this chart. It's a two-axis chart. The gold bars are charted against the left and the red dots on the right. We're worried about the proportional footprint of these two. And we can see in this example, based on real-life client data, they're not aligned. Therefore, our investments in initiatives to close our future fit gap are not lined up with the gap that actually exists. So the trick is we're trying to make this invisible stuff visible. That's the second step. If we move on to the third step, which is building the Future Fit operational scorecard, if we skipped step 2, we still need to identify those core processes. We still need to assess the impact, not necessarily the performance. Then we can go on and begin identifying where we need to provide performance indicators. So where do our core activities have the highest impact on our future fit goals? And from there we can identify indicators to use at each place, determine the signal strength for those indicators, set the targets, and then finally harvest the data and turn on the operational scorecard. What does that look like? Well, it's kind of the next level of detail down, where I should be able to see, for example, on the employee health, how we're currently performing, what the different milestones are and how we're achieving them, and then finally how we're doing on the related projects to try to close the gap. Now, there are multiple ways that we can portray this data, but the idea is to make it available to everyone in the organization so they can make informed choices about their performance. Finally, the fourth step, which is embedding this in our management practices. Now, it seems straightforward, but there are a couple of things we need to do. One is to make Future Fit part of the daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly reporting cycles and their discussions about improving the organization. Future Fit not only impacts our performance to improve it, but also reduces risk and improves stakeholder returns. So it needs to be part of the ongoing conversation. We also need to help people understand how to analyze and provide informed commentary on our Future Fit activities. Then we need to begin changing how we run our meetings to make sure these activities are part of the conversation and we have effective follow-up activities related to our commitments over the next period. So again, the Future Fit scorecard has 4 major steps. The corporate scorecard, which leads into the initiative alignment, which leads into the operational scorecard, and then that in turn leads into management practices. And these can be done in any sequence based on the organizational needs. I hope this has been informative to you. If you want to learn more, there's a second video that will go through the detailed methodology for each of these steps.